This is Liberty Under Attack Radio, hosted by Shane and Matt. Your place for documented truth and where freedom is the only agenda. We must end the terror war.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Liberty Under Attack Radio on the Freedom Phalanx Radio Network. Today is May 17th, 2015, and as always, we hope that you've had a pleasant, relaxing Sunday. It'll be just me hosting this evening, as Matt's been having some connection issues this week, unfortunately. If you feel like chiming in, feel free to. I will make two requests first, though. One, stay on topic, and two, keep it short. We do have a lot to get through. We're going to be hard-pressed to get through it in 2 hours as it is. But we would like to hear from you if you got something interesting to add. That call-in number is 218-895-3818, and you can reach us on Skype at FPRN Radio Live. In tonight's broadcast, we'll be joined again by Kyle Rearden from the Last Bastille blog. This week, he finished his article titled Chilling Dissent, How Government Demonizes Americans. And we're going to discuss profiling in as much depth as we can in 2 or so hours. The link to that document is tinyurl.com/chilling-dissent. And it is also in the FPRN chat there if you're tuning in there. I'll get that there in just a moment. But first, I'd like to provide some updates. I finally completed my video titled Can the SPLC Just Die Already?, which parallels a lot of stuff we're going to discuss tonight. You can find that video at youtube.com/libertyunderattack. Overall, though, I mean, it's been a quite interesting month, but especially the past week. If you tuned in to last week's show, you heard me discuss my adventure in Illinois law in regards to jury summons. Well, I was chosen on Monday to be a member of the jury in an aggravated battery case. I was forced by government to contribute to the tossing of a fellow citizen into a government dungeon, but I do think there were some beneficial aspects. First off, it gave me an in-depth look at the McLean County Law and Injustice Center, which is beneficial as far as first-hand experience goes. Second, I heard some quite questionable statements. For example, the judge advised us to lobby an Illinois representative, and several authorities blatantly lied about jury nullification, which was obviously expected. Lastly, for the sake of time, I saw the injustice system work its magic by threatening a citizen with 10 years for felony scratching. Yes, felony scratching. For the full story, go to libertyunderattack.com/LUA-news.html. So, Kyle, what are your thoughts on felony scratching?
Well, Shane, it's good to be back on your broadcast again. And felony scratching, well, I think it's a common principle of the common law that the punishment has to fit the crime. And I don't see why a couple of scratches on a nurse's arm should be considered a felony by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I definitely would have to agree. And yeah, she's facing upwards of 10 years, depending on what they decide to charge her with. And her sentencing is in a month, so I'm definitely going to kind of follow up on that and see what she does end up getting charged with. Definitely want to thank you for coming back on to Liberty Under Attack Radio. We always enjoy having you on. And we'll be discussing profiling this evening, correct?
Yes, more or less. That's correct.
Okay.
That the government's attempt essentially at identifying those people who are political dissidents and somehow punishing them in more ways than one. And just for the purposes of tonight, for people who don't know, a dissident is defined by Merriam-Webster's dictionary as someone who disagrees, particularly in the context of disagreeing with an establishment or an established religious or political system, organization, or belief. And particularly tonight, it's going to be more like politics or government. So anyone who disagrees with the government.
Okay, so I think you answered my next question, provide a sufficient introduction. I think you just did that. So why don't we get into it? Provide us a little context as into how long this has been going on and some of the introductory things we need to look at before we get started.
Sure. There is a great quote by Martin Niemöller from, I think, during World War II, and he said, quote, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out. because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me, close quote. So I think the idea here is that, if we want to have any semblance of even a minor version of a free society, then it would really be incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we can express ourselves in any ways we can. And so, if we look at things like that are enshrined in the law, such as the United States Constitution of 1787, the First and 10th Amendments mention that we do have the freedoms of speech, press, assembly, and petition, to wit, quote, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And then similarly, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Now, and also of the several other state constitutions, and here in Texas, under Article 1, Sections 8, 27, and 29, kind of reflect that First and 10th Amendment of the federal Constitution. Now, unfortunately, when the government does engage in various types of, shall I call it, profiling, what they're attempting to really do is chill dissent. There's something called the chilling effect, where they try to either retroactively or even preemptively discourage people from speaking their minds, especially when it comes to government conduct.
Yep, and let me provide the Illinois equivalent for the Illinois constitutional equivalent. Article 1, Section 4, freedom of speech. Obviously, all persons may speak, write, and publish freely, being responsible for the abuse of that liberty. And Article 1, Section 5 is the right to assemble and petition. So I think there's a couple examples that we need to kind of at least mention in passing. Chris Broden. What happened to him?
He's a rather interesting fellow. He was the guy several years back who showed up at that one healthcare rally, as some people would call it, really the medical insurance fraud promotion. And he was just trying to remind everybody that we still have an inalienable right to, keep and bear arms. Self-defense really is kind of the issue there. But unfortunately, the mainstream media cast him as, I guess you could call, an angry racist protester. And then later when they got caught and it was discovered that in terms of his physical appearance, he more or less was the spitting image of Malcolm X, they then had to switch the game up, the line, and claim that he was more or less an irresponsible gun owner. And then further investigation found out that he was a libertarian, much like you and I are.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention the media outlets that were reporting on this. They knew that he was black, and they intentionally shot him from the back so that you couldn't tell 100%, but you could obviously see, but you can tell there's a lot of deception there, and they're trying to use that to further their the I guess you could call it the race baiting type thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, Deborah Medina.
Now, this was, now I have to confess something first, just for purpose of full disclosure. Back when I thought that voting might work, which of course is a position I no longer personally hold, Deborah Medina was actually the last politician I voted for. So just full disclosure, just so that everyone knows that. Now, aside from that, what was valuable about Medina was that she was initially hailed by the alternative media as basically the female incarnation of Ron Paul. Yet when she tried to avoid explicitly supporting the 9/11 Truth movement, various people ranging from Glenn Beck to Alex Jones basically demonized her quite a bit, regardless of the fact that she was deliberately attempting to focus solely on political issues here in Texas instead of commingling them with issues with the federal government or much of anything else. So, Chris Broden, demonized by mainstream media. Deborah Medina, demonized, unfortunately, by quite a bit of the alternative media, and specifically the truthers. Yeah,
that was a... and for those who are interested, Kyle did put together a couple of videos on that, and they are on the LUA channel, one on Chris Broden and also on Deborah Medina if you do want to learn more about what happened. Next, Abby Newman.
Abby Newman was a lady who was basically pulled over by the police where she lived, And after I think it was at a DUI checkpoint, and unfortunately, what resulted was a verbal contest back and forth where they basically were grabbing her purse and ripping her out of the car, and they slapped the cuffs on and all that. Okay, here it is. On September 12th of 2000, Mrs. Newman was traveling along Virginia 40, minding her own business, when a state police officer motioned for her to pull over because it was I think it was a DUI checkpoint. Following her roadside interrogation, she was subsequently arrested for obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, that's always a good one, and assaulting a police officer. She was later acquitted of all charges by a jury of her peers. So obviously this was before 9/11. Keep that in mind. This was September of 2000. And what was rather interesting in the footage was that the officers were actually rummaging around in her car, one of those illegal searches and such, and they were commenting on the types of material she had in her car. I think it was like Patriot games, and I think like a manual on submarine warfare, and they were saying stuff like, "Oh my gosh, is she allowed to have this?" Like they were really scared.
Let's watch that. Producer, please cue up clip 1.
Reach inside my vehicle.
I'm going to place you under arrest for obstruction of justice.
What am I obstructing, sir? Sir!
Step out of the car for me. Step out of the car for me.
You are physically forcing me
Step out of the car.
No, sir, don't you touch any of my personal belongings in this car. You're right, I've recorded this conversation.
That's assault.
Yes, I did.
Resisting arrest.
It is not assault.
I'll get the car.
Don't you take one single item out of my vehicle, sir. I'm not fighting you.
You're under arrest for resisting arrest, obstruction of justice, and assault on a police officer.
I did not assault you. Sir!
Step out of the car for me. Step out
You
of the car
are
for me.
physically forcing me
Step out of the car.
No, sir, don't you touch any of my personal belongings in this car. You're right, I've recorded this conversation.
That's assault.
Yes, I did.
Resisting arrest.
It is not assault.
I'll get the car.
Don't take one thing
You have the
out
right
of
to
this
remain
vehicle.
silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. You have a right to speak to an attorney and have him present while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire an attorney, one will be appointed to represent you without any cost to you before any questions if you desire one. Do you understand those rights as they've been read to you? Do you understand your rights as they've been read to you? Oh, I see it there now. Strategies of submarine warfare. Hidden agenda. Called us.
Man, she's into this weird crap.
Power plays, ruthless.com, The Bear and the Dragon, Patriot games. Well, I just will get a record started.
Yeah. You don't ask her, you just want to get the next one.
I want to get the next one. She's invoked her right to remain silent, even though she don't believe in our laws. You wouldn't believe all the paraphernalia in here. I mean, look at this clipboard right here. Check me out. Comment upon voluntary nature of Social Security. It's a whole riot act on why you don't have to have a Social Security card to pay into Social Security.
She's just anti-government,
yeah. She apparently belongs to some kind of a clan or something.
Militant group.
Yeah. It's Dixieland Law Journal, Constitution Society. I mean, all kind of compulsory production of documents. I mean, this is...
Okay, producer, you can put that clip now. But yeah, as you can see, there were Patriot games, Social Security cards. She's just anti-government. She's an anti-government constitutionalist.
Yeah, and there was a little quip there about how she must be a member of the Klan, allegedly, just because. And that was the other thing, too, and which is really pertinent for what we're discussing here. Notice when the trooper mentioned about all the paraphernalia in the car, and kind of implying that either it's illegal or salacious or somehow, or for whatever other reason, she shouldn't have had it. So when he said, oh, the paraphernalia, oh my goodness, she don't believe in our laws. Well, I mean, that's kind of the problem, isn't it? Because,